Okay, this video is a succinct expressions in summary, that is, of Earth ageism. And we've learned through meticulous research and study that it's something very common that can easily be overlooked. So let's look at that very quickly. And we'll talk about first just ageism. So we'll talk about Earth. There we go. Earth and mankind. There we go. So we're looking at ageism. We know in reference to mankind, we have a chronological we have two ages. We have a chronological age, and then we have a biological age. Biological age. So those two, one is how long, for example, a person has been alive, and then biological is how long does it seem, that is, if we did measures of fitness, condition, we know that some people age much more quickly and in the short lifespan or in their chronological years they might be much older biologically. When we know in research in certain animals, for example, household pets, I hate to bring up my favorite pets in the past, but we know that we're looking at somewhere they can age at a rate almost a decade in 1 year's time. So we're well aware of that and familiar with that. So when we come over here to the Earth ageism, for example, there's a chronological, and then there's a geological age. And these aren't in conflict any more than our chronological and biological. So we know that man lived within 1,000-year day, 1,000 years, with Methuselah. Methuselah lived 969 years, and no one lived outside that 1,000 years. So today we're looking at 100 years lifespan approximately. We hear people that push toward that 120 mark, like we heard in Genesis 6, where people debate today if it's 120-year duration of God's tolerance or was that a lifespan. We know in Psalm 90 that 90% of the life expectancy of 100% of the human race was removed, so that we live 70 years up to 80 if we have strength. So if you take the 120 of Genesis 6, the 80 of Psalm 90, we're still looking at an average around 100 years. So, for example, Methuselah was 969 chronological years, but what was his biological? So Methuselah, 969 years, he had 969 years, we'll just say, yes, years chronological age. And what was his biological age? We now know this. We know it was 96.9 because we know we age 10 times faster today. So biologically, if, for example, chronologically, let's say, I preached a funeral of a person who was over 100 years old. So they were 100 years chronologically. That is, they had a 100-year chronological age. This is a modern person. But they had a 1,000-year biological. So if we were to look at someone that lived 1,000 years antediluvian period of time, and they would look like 100-year-old a day, and vice versa. So that's demonstrated in the Bible. This is modern man. This is antediluvian man. So he'd have 96.9 years biological. There. And you see that now. This falls into place. So this is the antediluvian. This is the post-diluvian man. So for us, our 100 years really takes a toll on us, but we also can learn and see that ratio and that inverse ratio. So we come over here and we know the earth, we're told anywhere from 6 to 20,000 years. That's the what we call the young earth assertion, and a lot of criticisms made from certain from both religion and science, because this is a division in religion, in the field of religion and science. So if you assert a chronological age that contradicts the geological age, they don't sort that out that way. And Dr. Penn, in his, let's just say his vast experience with hermeneutics and for years and years of searching the scriptures, he was convinced there's a formula in here. So now we can demonstrate this. So we did it over here with ratios. So can we demonstrate the chronological and geological ages of the earth? So now we're looking here at, that's mankind, chronological and biological. We're very familiar with this. We can see the ratio of 1,000 to 100, which is very easy to do. So over here we can take our approximate 6,250 years. We've done this before. But for those of you who've never seen it like this, where we're distinguishing, as the Bible does, between biological and geological, just as we know the Bible distinguishes between biological and chronological age. Because we know if Noah's 500 years old building an ark, he couldn't be more than 50 years biologically, or he would not be high functioning in the construction process. But we know he was. So, and this is at 12 hours a day. Jesus said there's 12 hours in the day. So we just double this, 250 years at 12 hours night. This gives us the 12,000. This is approximate 500 years. And this is to demonstrate the ratio that actually proves the bigger thing, that there is a distinction here between geological and chronological age. So when we take the numbers the Bible gives us, 12,500 years times a 360-day year, that equals 4.5 million days. And then when we take the 4.5 million days, so let's make that A, and we take B, 4.5 million days times 1,000 years, that equals 4.5 billion years. And that would be the amount, the geological age of the earth. Well, now if we go the opposite direction, 1,000 years is a day, because the Bible tells us one day is 1,000 years. That's a ratio. And then if we take 1,000 years is one day, well, we just go the opposite direction. So see here, we go 4.5 billion years times 1,000 days. Now this time we've gone the opposite direction. And 1,000 days is approximately 2.78 years to give us a multiplier, and that equals 12.5 billion years. Geological age. The geo age of the universe. Okay, so according to Dr. Penn's research, well, his knowledge, and then the research that Dr. Eddie Johnson and I engaged and worked on, and we collaborated and talked about it. We took the numbers that were in the Bible, and that was the research parameters that Dr. John Penn gave us. And of course, he's finalizing some more research in a forthcoming publication, but he's making it where we can all understand it. What is the doctrine of earth ageism and mankind ageism as taught in the Bible, when we can see more readily the chronological and biological distinction in our lifespan, especially if you go to the doctor. Well, I shouldn't say anything about it, but when I attend, there's always a great contrast between my chronological and my biological. And if you've ever had a battle, let's say with a disease of some kind, you notice that starts affecting your biological age quickly. You start receiving, let's say, compressed time. I know I was helping a person who had been given a terminal diagnosis, and they were very distressed because now they not only knew the disease that they had contracted and that was assaulting their body, but they now knew how quickly it would accelerate their demise, and they biologically, if you will, would die much sooner than the chronological lifespan, let's say of 100 years, ideally, and 80 years optimally speaking, I suppose. So we know the difference between chronological, but we also know that when we do things that affect our health negatively, we hear smoking, we hear certain types of diets, we know about pharmaceuticals, we know all the things, toxins that can come into our bodies. So this is something we're very familiar with. It's just the, and I'll just say this, it's the scholarship, for example, of the Missionary Baptist Seminary, for example, where the teachers and Dr. John Penn worked to develop his holistic hermeneutic approach, that noticed that really a lot of the apparent conflict between young versus old can be, that embarrassing difficulty can be resolved by just simply defining our terms. Like, of what are we speaking when we talk about old? Well, you're talking about a geological age. And what are you talking about when you speak in terms of young? You're talking about a chronological. So when we find out that the Bible speaks of chronicles, ages, but the Bible doesn't give us except the numbers we have, and that's sufficient to demonstrate that the Bible teaches, and it's self-evident if we stay within the research parameters and use our numbers, as he said, Dr. Penn that is, said that there's a formula in there, meaning there is a relationship. So the ratio and the inverse relationship to division is multiplication, but third grade arithmetic is not what this class is about. It's to show the languages that if we use our language, and we have in this class, and you remember even the letter Aleph, that first letter in Hebrew, it means one and also 1,000, which we also now know this. Well, that means it means 1,000 and also the number one. So we have that, we have quantifiers, we have data, we have relationships, and we have the language to have prompted us and shown us. But I think the clarity of it that he brought to it was to return this subject to consistent understanding and a way of expressing it. For example, Dr. Al Mohler, and I'll include some notes from his article, where he was had labored and toiled to try to give a rationale for why the earth appears so much older than the time it's existed. Well, chronological refers to how long the earth existed, and geological refers to how old it seems to be and appears to be. But it's not an illusion, it's not deception, it's decay rate. So we now know that, as Dr. Penn demonstrated, that the decay rate for man today, our decay rate, is 10 times that, let's say, of Adam. 10 times that of Adam. So Adam lived within a 1,000-year lifespan, and we would live within 100. So now we see the decay rate of the earth, and we notice that God has placed the curse, if we will, of accelerating decay is consistently applied to the earth and to mankind. And we notice in Romans, it says the creation was subjected unwillingly. It was subjected without consent. It had no say in the matter. And mankind, Adam, without being deceived, subjected mankind with consent. So this is quite a contrast, but it's very consistent to see that earth ageism and the Bible doctrine of ageism in relationship to mankind, that we know this. And it's very, very, very astute of Dr. John Penn to be able to place it in such, well, it's a correlative, because we can move from, we notice very quickly chronological and biological. It's just that when we hear about geological, we just sometimes don't make this distinction here. But it's easier this way. So he set it up in what we'd call a correlative with its antitheticals, but he shows the consistency of all of it. So enjoy this lesson. It's extremely, it's a large breakthrough. It certainly shows the Bible to be as credible as it's always been. There's research out there, genetic entropy. John Sanford, Cornell University, wrote a book called Genetic Entropy. There's a mathematical evaluation of the Bible in which it was observed that there must be a mathematical model inside the text of which they were aware. Dr. John Penn had that extracted, posited outwardly, if you will. And yes, he's very much devoted to expository teaching and preaching. So we posited outwardly. This is posited outwardly from the text and demonstrates that the Bible has knowledge as self-evident as we know the Antediluvian and Post-diluvian decay rate of man, the hinge being Psalm 90, written by Moses, who also wrote Genesis. Well, we also have the same self-evident data concerning the Earth's ageism and the distinction between chronological and geological. So have a blessed day. Enjoy this lesson.